the Monsters is out, and I hope everyone that's clicked on this video has gone out to watch it. It's awesome. For such a long time we've speculated and theorized what the Titans might look like, from the four returning classic Toho kaiju to the variety of other brand new legendary Titans. And it seems like fans are more than happy with the way the Titans turned out, all being modernized with a slight twist to make them seem grounded in a more realistic setting. But in the film production process you'll find they go through hundreds of failed attempts to make it just right. So let's take a look at the Titans we didn't get to see in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. I'm Alistair, and welcome to our lovely town of Dangerville. First, let's take a look at some of the returning monsters from Toho's classic series. Godzilla went through a variety of changes prior to King of the Monsters. Some had him looking like an amphibian, some looked almost exactly like the Heisei versions, and some somehow worse than what Godzilla 1998 would go on to look like. But after refinement, they finally got to the iconic legendary design that we have today. Now for King of the Monsters, they knew they had to keep the same design that fans have come to love, though they wanted to make slight changes to honour the originals. The dorsal plates were changed to look more like Showa Godzilla's, and the feet underwent changes based on people's complaints that the feet were too stumpy. And the end results give us something that still looks unapologetically legendary, whilst honours the originals in a way that will make most fans of the franchise happy. Rodan also went through some changes from the original Toho series, taking the idea of it being a volcano-dwelling monster and magnifying it to new levels by making his body biofuse with the lava itself, having it ooze from his flesh. Though conceptually they were originally going to give Rodan feathers, which made him look much more like a giant bird than anything. Though this wasn't first conjured up by Legendary, Toho themselves were the one that originally designed Rodan to be more of a giant bird than a pterodactyl-like kaiju. Luckily they decided to go with the latter, and we have the iconic design that we see today. Legendary then decided to go with a design that stayed true to the one we see on screen and scrapped the feathers. What's funny is that the design was leaked about a year before the film was even released, but people waved it off as fake on the pretense that Rodan doesn't have feathers, though these concepts now prove it was indeed real and simply an early model. Now onto the next design that we didn't see in the film. Next up, let's look at the devil with three heads himself, King Ghidorah. This one went through a variety of changes in the conceptual stage, some straying pretty far from the source material, by trying to make it look more like an alien to reflect its origin. They took inspiration from various sea life, things that live so far down at the bottom of the ocean that to us, they might as well be, for all intents and purposes, alien. Instead of the hair-like mane you see in Toho's films, they had tendrils and gills, and the teeth would wrap around the face, and with no lips, it looked more like the jaw of a wolf. Whilst this design is super interesting and quite intimidating, it just doesn't quite feel like Ghidorah. It lacks personality, it could just be any sea serpent. So they went back to the drawing board and came back with something that closely resembled the Chinese dragon design that Toho originally took influence from, and came back with something that looked and felt more like King Ghidorah. One of the designs even had the long mustache-like nose tendrils, often seen on Chinese dragons. And with further refining, the tentacle mane would be simplified to just horns. So instead of being called King Ghidorah, it would mostly be implied by the crown on its head. One of the biggest things that had to change was how Ghidorah was mobilized. The way Ghidorah was originally designed was so a man could walk around inside it, but these days it looks outdated and his legs look like tree trunks, not something you'd see on a nimble flying creature. So they decided to change the legs to be closer to that of a theropod, and the wings would be used for support, which was a change that left fans divided, since it was so different from anything we saw before, though it was a necessary change to make Ghidorah more menacing and realistic. Though again, over a year ago there was a rumoured leak, and fans waved it off as fake because they'd never put Ghidorah's wings like that, but the art book again confirms that this leak was indeed true, and that was merely an early concept. Mothra as seen in King of the Monsters is quite drastically different to what we see in the originals. Being fluffy and cute, her appearance was designed to be quite welcoming and friendly, which reflects her character. Well, outside of the original. Through the years, she got fluffier and cuter, but for Legendary's film, they scrapped that and made her look much more like a real insect. Fan-made artwork suggested the idea that they should make her look completely like a moth, though the director stated that they wanted Mothra to hold up in a fight, and that they designed her to be much more capable. Not much is known about the concepts for Mothra, so it's presumed they felt like they had the right design fairly early on, by taking cues from wasps, praying mantises, and even the Mutos. It gave us a super interesting, kind of disgusting, but also strangely cute design. Now let's move on to the new Titans that we see in King of the Monsters. They mostly boast interesting fresh designs, and though we've only seen a couple minutes of them in the movie, it's cool to see the first new Godzilla kaiju in a live-action film since the Mutos debuted in 2014. First up, let's look at the first new Titan that we see in the film, and that is Scylla. First seen rising up from the oil fields in Arizona, awakened by Ghidorah's call to arms. Sporting 6 legs, a tentacle mouth, and a crustacean-like exoskeleton similar to what's seen on crabs, though there were many very different conceptual designs that helped develop it to what we see today. Originally, Scylla was going to be more like a giant squid, looking more like something that would spawn from Cthulhu. It introduced the idea of having a multi-armed creature, even if the tentacles will be turned into crab-like legs in the final film. The next idea they tried out was having him take more of an insect-like form, by including an exoskeleton, pincers, and a scorpion-like tail, though they removed the tentacles from the previous concept. Even though these are not like the designs we see in the film, you can see where the influences carry over from their previous form, being far bulkier than the final version, but introducing the idea of it being more like an insect than something that would come out of the sea. Even though the final form doesn't have a scorpion-like tail, you can see the creature certainly has those characteristics, especially when it rises out of the ground. The final version we see in the film would end up having 6 legs, pincers, and a much more slimmed down physique, but also tentacles that hark back to the very first concepts. The reason for slimming it down could potentially be that the role was already fulfilled by our next Titan that we're going to look at, and that is Methuselah. This Titan is seen rising up from the ground in Munich, Germany, as if a mountain itself had begun to move, awakened from its slumber by Ghidorah's call. This Titan appears to have an Earth-like aesthetic, armoured heavily with some similarities to dinosaurs like Ankylosaurus. Trees appear to be growing from its hide, and it has tusks protruding from each side of its jaw. The mountain appears to have grown on top of the Titan during its slumber, and it has formed a shell like what's seen on turtles. This went through a lot of notable changes during its conceptual stage, originally appearing much like a rhino, sporting 4 legs, thick skin, and a horn at the front of its head. They would continue to evolve this design, adding more horns, making it look more unique, unlike any animal currently alive, making it look more like something you'd find in Dougal Dixon's book, After Man. The most notable change appears to be the removal of the horn, and turning the thick skin into something that could blend in with the mountains. Lastly, let's talk about Behemoth. This one made quite an impact on viewers for reasons I can't quite put my fingers on. But this monstrosity took most of its cues from mammoths, with the thick layer of brown fur and tusks, but with an added twist using primate elements such as the body proportions and posture of a silverback gorilla, and the lack of a trunk. This was really unique, but it wasn't always this unique. Originally, it was just going to look identical to a mastodon, with slight changes such as added tusks on the lower jaw, like what's seen on Dinotherium. This went through probably the least changes, as there's not much else documented outside of the mammoth-like design. Seems like they were confident they had a solid design rather early on. So those are what the Titans could have looked like. But what did you think of the concepts? Did you prefer any of the original artwork over what we see in the final film? Let us know in the comment section down below. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and now Amino, where we'll post regular stories. Don't forget to subscribe to become a resident of Dangerville today, so you don't miss out on anything Godzilla related. Now before I go, I'd just like to tell you about a little something called G-Fest that's coming up. It's the biggest Godzilla convention in the world, and it's returning once again to Chicago this July. Jacob and I will both be attending and will be part of the Godzilla YouTubers panel, alongside Deanman1954 Monstrosities Tokusatsu Vlog, Kaiju Noir, and Titan Goji. And it will be commencing at 3 PM on Sunday the 14th of July. You can get tickets at the door, so make sure to pop by and say hi. I've been Alistair from Dangerville, and residents, thank you for watching.